This is Paul with ElkNut Outdoors, and on this interview we're going to talk about a hunting story. And if we have time, maybe we'll throw a second one in on this one. Depends how long it takes. But you know, there's nothing better than talking about a hunting story in the off season. Kind of get you revved up, get you pumped up for something that we all have a passion for, and that's hunting those elk. When those elk are vocal, I tell you what, there ain't nothing like it. You know, I've been doing this a lot of years at near 60 years of age, and you can imagine how many bugles I've heard, you know, in my lifetime between scouting elk, studying them, research, hunting elk. We try to hunt elk 25 days a year in the rut, and we do pretty good at hitting that number. Heck, I wouldn't be surprised if there's times we actually do more than that. But you know, out of all those years, you still never get tired of hearing a bull bugle. Even though I've been doing this for a lot of years, for a lot more than some people have been alive that are listening to this. But you just don't get tired of hearing that bugle. And I can't wait to hear my next one. I mean, it just gets in you. It's very, very addictive. So listen to a hunting story like right now. You know, the time is right. Stories are great, and what's nice about telling a story is not leaving out the details. It's one thing to share a hunting story and say, yeah, we did some calling, the bull responded, next thing you know, the bull's sitting there at 35 yards, and we shot him and packed him out. Well, you know, that doesn't tell you a whole lot. I mean, that's wonderful and all in good and all, but what you need to know is the details, especially if you've taken an elk at those times when they just aren't talking much. Nothing. And so, and if you have kind of a track record where you're doing this on a regular basis, and you're doing well when the elk just aren't in rut fest mode, meaning the cows aren't in estrus or in heat, and bulls are bugling everywhere in competition for the ladies to take notice of them, as these bulls are advertising themselves everywhere, you know, wanting to be chosen. And so those are great times, and those are awesome times to be there, and I want to be there when that's happening. But unfortunately, a lot of the days we hunt every year, the weather may not be good. Sometimes you have a full moon, sometimes you have snow. In many cases you have a 10-day hunt or 7-day hunt, and the elk aren't talking for half of those days or more. Other times you're going out there and they're going everywhere at 8 to 10 times. You know, 8 days out of 10. So we need to know how to take advantage of these times when elk just aren't saying much. There's going to be those days when you get little to no action, but it's not that time. It's not time to just sit in camp and do nothing. So here's one of those situations where we had left early in the morning, and we had hunted for about 2.5 hours, and the rains were coming down so bad that we just basically tossed a towel in. I mean, you couldn't hear anything out anywhere. And we had a real good destination in mind that we were going to go to, but it didn't pan out because of the weather. And we weren't bivvy hunting. It was more of leaving camp, driving to a specific spot, and basically boondocking it. We don't hunt trails much. We pretty much stay away from them, even though elk can be heard or killed off of a trail. But there's a lot of people that seek those easier avenues out. And so we pretty much try to stay away from those. This was no exception. On this particular day, there was actually 3 of us. My son wanted to bring a friend along who had never hunted in his life, and they were the same age. And so we thought, oh yeah, no big deal, come on, let's go, you know, and see what it's like. And so we head out with our bows, and like I say, we get rained out. So now we decide, you know what, instead of just heading back out of here, we had like an hour drive to try to get back toward town or into camp. And we decided, let's just take a couple of these dirt roads that hardly nobody ever travels. Some are 4-wheel drive ones. You know, guys have a tendency to stay on the better dirt roads or gravel roads. Not everybody, but a lot of this happens. So these other overlooked roads, you might say, don't get so much action. And this day was raining anyway. Most guys are saying forget it. So we decided we're going to drive down this one dirt road. See, I told you to have a few little details. But we're driving down this road, and it's just a bumpy, gnarly over thing. And funny thing about it is we had never been on this road before, ever. And we just thought, you know, we always have these areas that we're going to go to. And we just decided, well, let's just try this. And where does it go? What does it even do? So we're meandering down there. We probably go around for like 15 minutes, waiting for the rain to let up just a little bit as we're creeping along. Because what we're going to do is get out and bugle. And right now it's probably 10:30 in the morning. And you know, you don't get a lot of action at that time. But you never know. If you don't try, you don't know. And so we decide, well, let's get out and we'll bugle here and bugle there. And hopefully we can hear something if it responds, because it was pretty noisy out there because of the weather. It wasn't really windy, just kind of a rainy, it'd get drizzly and then it'd come down harder. One of those days, you know. Enough when the brush is really wet and you're boondocking it. You're probably more soaked from the brush than you are actually from the rain coming down, just because it's been coming down for so long that day and night. But anyway, so we're driving along, we try a couple spots, nothing, you know, no big surprise there. And we get into this one, and we're turning to the right, where the road kind of turns to the right, and it doesn't look like it goes much further. But like I said, we hadn't been there, so we weren't sure. So we kind of park off, and we look off, and we can see a little bit of a draw down below us, and the hill and the mountainside goes up on the other side, probably, oh geez, I'd say 800 more feet above us. So we thought, well, this kind of has some sound, maybe carrying, and that's a good area over there. Maybe something's around there or bedded, because it was 10:30 in the morning. So if you catch something at that time of day, this is good food for thought here. If you catch an animal that's vocal at that time, it's already in its bedding area. So there's a good chance that when you hear something at that time of day, it isn't going anywhere. It's staying right there. So, you know, kind of keep that in mind, and we knew that. We knew if we caught something there that it wasn't any transition from feeding to bedding, or so it wasn't generally on the move. Normally it's right in the area or destination that it's going to stay there most of the day. So it's a good time to call sometimes if you can get a response. Well, this day we jump out, and God, I can't remember if I was driving or not. Might have been. Sometimes I do, sometimes my son does. But I get out, and this is the sound I'm using right here. I'm actually going to give you the actual location sound that I use at these times. Nothing special, and all I'm trying to do is get a response. I'm not trying to call anything to me. I'm not trying to get aggressive. I'm just trying to get a note that'll carry out there and sound like one of their own. And many times they'll respond to it. And so here's the note. It sounds something like this. That's about it. Nothing fancy, no big growl. And you know what? In many cases, when situations are like that, if you threw out 3 or 4 chuckles or tried to get some grunts or growls in the inning, they don't hear it anyway. All they hear is a high note. So there's really no reason to waste the air, you know, from you, because it really doesn't do any good. So again, we're just trying to get a response. Here's the response I got back. I finally got a response back. And it was down that draw, which was about 150 yards, maybe 175 yards, pulling away from us. But right directly where we're looking down, heavy timber, a lot of brush, but you can see the draw was somewhere down there, had a little bit of water in it. And right up on the other side, probably at least at the elevation we were at, another 150 yards or so above us, I heard this sound, something similar to this sound right here. That was it. Nothing else. And so, of course, you know, that's enough. You know, it's like, okay, did you guys hear that? You know, yeah. We all kind of hovered together and agreeing on the direction it came from. Yeah, it was right over there. And if anything, I'm the one who can't hear worth 2 cents. Just my ears from construction stuff over the years, you know. I was too tough a guy to use earplugs. And boy, do I pay the price now, let me tell you. But anyway, we did agree that it did come from this one hillside and well elevated above us. So we thought, well, it's noisy, it's so wet, brushy, you know, we don't want to go through all that and go up there after this elk and then find out that we can't even find out where he is. You know, you've been there, done that. So we're going to see what we can do about bringing this bull over to us. And of course, you know, in the meantime, we're kind of thinking of a plan, and I decide, okay, I'll give another, you know, toot on the horn here and see if I can get him to respond again. A few minutes have gone by in our discussion and what we're going to do. And I try again. Nothing. Never said makes a sound. He basically gave us a direction, let us know where he was at, and that was, he was content. There was nothing fired up. I believe this was probably around September the 8th. You know, somewhere in there. It definitely wasn't near peak rutting time at all. But you never know. You could get some bugling going on. So anyway, I fired that off and nothing. Do it another time, probably a few minutes later, nothing. Gave some cow calls, nothing. Couldn't get an answer, a response. And the cow calls that were given were something along this line. mixing up some little soft ones, you know, kind of quiet. And of course, you know, at the distance he was, they sounded really low. So you want to get a little bit of volume depending on how distant the elk are when you're trying to at least get them to hear you and get them through that weather that was happening in the rain and the dripping in the woods. And I was pretty sure he could hear us pretty easily, and he showed no interest. Nothing whatsoever. And there could, as far as we knew, there could have been a whole herd up there. But we did pretty much have him pegged. That is probably no more than a 4 or 5 point, spindly, small 5, definitely wasn't a big herd bull. He just didn't have the mature sound to him. But yet, you know, they was going to knock, you know, there was much happening, and a bull like that would have been just fine. And so my son was going to be the shooter, and we decided we're going to set up and we're going to try to call this bull. So we moved away from the pickup probably no more than 100 yards. And we're set up, and the new guy that was with us, we left him back behind. Paul set up, my son is set up right here, and I'm probably 40 yards behind him. And the other guy is off to my right a little bit. He's maybe a little bit further back, and we put him in the brush. And he's going to be the guy making all the racket and stomping around and has a stick in both hands and rustling, tickling, and then a little more aggressive and moving left and right, you know, 15 yards, and just touching like elk are moving over there and walking around. As we started simulating the sounds. My son and I did the calling. The other guy didn't have a clue how to call. But we told him what to do in the sequence we were calling to try to show some activity, like they were milling around. And so between my son and I, we did some cow calling and some real low bugling, just like there was a little group over there. And we tried to simulate that because of the fact that there were elk, that he may be interested and curious because elk are herd animals to come down and check out who this group was, because we weren't that far from him. If he didn't come, no harm, no foul, he stayed up there. But we found out from experience in the past that a lot of times when you do this kind of a blind cold calling setup, you know, cold calling meaning he's not continuing to call, that it can pull him over if you'll put in the time. We had started calling like that off and on with the cow sounds kind of. Stuff like that. We went off and on like that for probably 15, 20 minutes. Went in and started kind of rattling and hitting the brush and, you know, just really making it real. Little foot stomping, you know, of stuff, and just kept tickling and rattling, and we'd do a little calling. We'd have just slight pauses, hardly nothing more than 30 seconds. But just kind of casting our sounds left, right, behind us where the other guy was tickling and rattling. And actually, he was getting a little more aggressive than I probably would have. Guys, the new guy, he didn't know. I mean, you could hear him pretty loud. I mean, he was really picking it up, and which was fine, you know, because the bull was at a distance. We did this for 20 minutes, maybe 25. It's hard to say, just off and on a little bit. But we kept it up, nonstop. And I'm going to say somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes. My son is sitting there, he's going to be the shooter where we felt this elk should come up, and I decided I'm going to swing around to the left. And the other guy, he's still rustling along, and my son every once in a while is just giving a cow sound, and I'm not calling at all since I left position. And I'm going around, and I've only been gone 1 minute, maybe 90 seconds from my son. I'm about 75 yards to his left, but not in front of him. And he's looking down the mountain where this bull, we're hoping, is going to come up this draw if he comes at all. So, as I hook around, I'm just barely over there, and off to my right, where my son is set up, I can hear that, you know, that arrow, and whack, and just crash, bang, crash. And I started heading over toward my son, kind of where I knew he was and where I heard the shot. And all of a sudden I see this flash in front of me, just shoom, a streak, go right on down the mountain, right about where I thought this bull was going to come up. So I go running over toward my son, and before I get to him, I see about where that bull was, or the elk. I couldn't even really see, it was such a flash, as it ran across, and there's blood everywhere. And I'm like, holy cow! So I go back up to my son, and, you know, what the heck happened? What's going on here? And he says, well, you took off, you went over that way. He says, and as soon as you did, I could hear something walking up the hill, but I couldn't see anything. He said, I could just hear barely things popping. He said, so I kind of got ready and I already had his arrow nocked. And he said all of a sudden he could just see parts of an animal coming up. And as it came up to his left, he said it was off to his left about 20-25 yards. It started coming up the hill and it got about 20 yards from him. And he said it was a mess of stuff and he drew his bow and waited, waiting for it to come. He goes, all of a sudden it turned broadside and just walked from its left, where I was, toward his right. Walked right across and stopped in front of him at 17 yards. He said, I'm at full draw. And he goes, I was going to try to stop the bull, but he just stopped on his own. He just stopped dead, looking all over in the direction where the other guy is still rattling and crashing and banging the brush everywhere. And the elk is looking over there. Fortunately, he couldn't see. There was too much stuff in the way, too much debris and brush and trees. He couldn't see the guy. And the other guy had no idea anything's going on. He's just doing his job. So, boy, he was a trooper. And anyway, this bull stops. Paul zings one right through him right there. Just right on through. Well, like I said, the blood trail was just monstrous and the bull ran on down. But the point is this bull only gave one bugle. That was it. Nothing else on this particular case. But yet we set up, we got to where we thought was a good spot, even though the weather was really crappy and stuff. And it ended up drawing this bull out, and he ended up being a 4x5 bull. He actually, you could count a 5. He's probably an inch on the other side. He was basically a 5-point bull. But he came all the way across, came over to there on a day that was pretty much wasted at that point, and it pulled him over, and that bull never made another sound. Nothing. So how many times would you have gone over there and hunted or maybe did some calling and just didn't stay long enough or make it sound real enough? A lot of times guys will set up, but they're not stomping, tapping, knocking things, rolling a few little rocks, rustling the brush, raking, giving enough bull sounds in there. You could do cow sounds if you want. You could have done bull sounds, but just that little mixture and nothing big with the bull, it just made it very inviting. And so that was kind of cool that, making it real like that was something that to us has worked so many times over the years. And it was basically just a blind cold calling setup. And I'll tell you what, on that day, it really, really worked well. And we'll take that every time. Yeah, it's great to kill some herd bulls and this and that, but you never know. Sometimes you just take what you can get that day, make the best of it. But hopefully this information like this in this story can help you to appreciate that bulls don't have to just be screaming all the time in order to get in them and have an opportunity at them. And we enjoy the running and gunning, the calling. Yeah, you can kill them out of a tree stand and off of walls and this and that, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we enjoy the challenge of trying to beat them at their own game with doing some calling. I'm just going to take a quick drink of water here. And I have a second story, because this one's shorter. But we're just going to throw these two together just for grins, because we can. And on this one, this was one where it was just my son and I. We had gone into this one area, and we thought, this would be a really good one. I believe this was about September the 3rd. We hadn't been hearing anything. But we had scouted it previously that year, and we knew there was a lot of elk activity in there. And when we're looking for elk and scouting, or I should say scouting elk country, we're not really looking for the elk. We really don't care if we see anything. We like to get into the areas that they usually will feed in and water and spend their nights in. Not their daytime, but their nights. And so when you get into these areas and you start looking for a sign, it just tells you if they've been around. If the sign isn't fresh, they're not there. They're not going to just materialize out anywhere. But if they are living in the area, you go to some of those feeding areas and you can really see where the activity is and the droppings and where they're eating everything. And so, yeah, we know they're there and we know about where they like to bed. Once you know your areas well, you'll put these pieces of the puzzle together. Well, we went in there this one morning. We had walked probably close to 3 miles, zinging around. There's a lot of little finger ridges and small little parks, nothing major like backcountry hunting, nothing that large. And so we went ahead and we were kind of fiddling around with those little spots right there, calling in, calling here. And we really wasn't getting much activity. We weren't doing many setups. But, it was just one of those days, kind of a feeling out thing, because it was only the 3rd, and we love waiting for the bulls to get cowed up before we really work them. And so it wasn't like we just had to kill something, but it would have been nice too. But we're coming out. So this is one of those days we had already hunted. It's probably 11 o'clock, maybe 11:30 in the morning, creeping up on noon. And as we're coming out, I remember we're walking up the mountainside. We're heading straight up, and we're probably about a mile from the rig now. And as we're heading up, we're really, throwing caution to the wind. You're not paying a lot of attention to everything. And we're not being talking noisy. We never do that. We may whisper or motion, hand signal, or whatever that may be, but we're not yapping along and throwing our sound out everywhere when we know we're in the elk country there. So we're, just trying to paint a picture in your mind's eye there of what we were doing as we're slipping up through, heading back. And all of a sudden, about, I would say 50, 60 yards in front of me, we hear an elk. And here's what we hear as we're slipping up through there. Where my son and I were probably maybe 4 or 5 yards apart. And I hear this sound right here. That was it. We knew immediately what that meant. We had been probably heard, no doubt, and maybe even partially seen, because it was thick enough that it wasn't a concrete visual of us, but maybe saw movement, but definitely could hear us. And again, 50, 60 yards away, wasn't very far. 10:30, 11:30, whatever it was in the morning. But once again, this elk was bedded down. I really felt it was a bull. I didn't think it was a cow because of the matureness. It seems like cows have much more of a lighter note. And sometimes some of those cows will have like a dog bark, more of a, really deep, like, geez. But I felt this was a bull. Wasn't sure, but felt he was. So immediately my son and, we kind of just locked up right there. Like, what do? We know he just gave us that popping nervous grunt, and he wanted an identification. He wanted a visual. He wanted satisfaction that we weren't a threat, because he heard or saw something or both and wasn't sure, and no doubt he was on edge. But he only gave it that one note. And so I kind of grabbed my son right there, and I let him know. I said, stay right here. Don't move. Just stay here. And didn't tell him what I was going to do because, things are happening fast. So I thought, what I'm going to do is give a couple cow sounds real soft, and I'm going to start walking away. I'm going the other direction. Hopefully, it pulls this bull over. If it doesn't, whatever, we're leaving anyway. But you never know, I didn't want to give it back to him. I thought about giving the nervous grunt back to him, but I thought this is a situation that's just not great for it. There are times when you can do that, and I'm not saying this wouldn't have worked, but my gut feeling was don't go that route. So immediately I grabbed my call, which I'm sure I didn't even have it in my mouth walking out. I had it in my top shirt pocket where my pack comes across it on my shoulder strap. And so I just reached in, grabbed my call out, and turned around and kind of just went, walking back. And I do this, I bet you I walk between 80 and 100 yards, giving just enough volume that I think he can hear. I'm not trying to go real rapid or speedy with it, but I'm just letting him know this thing that he heard or saw was a cow. And I'm not throwing any bull sounds in, and I'm not throwing in 3 different cow sounds or a calf with her or nothing. I just was being a single cow, and that I got to that point, and once he did that nervous grunt, I didn't want nothing to do with him. I'm turning around and leaving and going back the way I came. And basically that was all I was trying to paint the picture. Because I call a lot of cows in doing this, where I've spotted them, got back in the timber and started calling and go back. And I'm talking 75% of the time, you pull those cows or some of the cows out of that group and they'll come following, trying to catch up with you. So I thought, I'm trying to think quick here because this is something that can go array real fast. And at this time, I decided this is what we're going to do, and I started pulling away. I don't hear anything. This bull doesn't make another sound, nothing whatsoever. I left my son sitting there. Well, as I go back to the certain point, and now I'm hanging up there, so to speak, and making a few more sounds. And as I'm leaving, I should tell you, I'm cracking, popping things. I'm not trying to be sneaky and tiptoe. I'm popping a stick here and purposely trying to find something on the ground I can tap, kick, like I'm hitting a hoof, right there on a rock, a log, just a little bit, and cracking, popping, and giving the cow sounds as I'm leaving, making it as realistic as possible. So as I did that, I kind of hover now in this 80, 100 yard, whatever distance I am from my son, and just calling. I probably wasn't there 30 seconds. And hoping that this bull was going to pull up. And I didn't run to that distance. I meandered. I didn't go in a straight line. I kind of just went this way, a little bit like she's maybe feeding, dinking, but showing no interest in him and pulling away. And I'm not over calling. When I said I was making those sounds, I should, reiterate that I'm probably making a couple of calls and then moving 15, 20 yards and popping another little one out or two. Maybe play with the volume just a little bit, make it realistic. A lot of times when these cows are talking, they're not giving you the same monotone or the same exact volume. They're not kind of... That's not what they're doing. A lot of times they'll train. So I just kind of slowly mix it up like that as I'm slipping away. So you really get an idea of what I did there and how well this can work. And we've done this many times, since then and before. But in this situation, this is what I did. So I heard that instinctive crashing, banging, running, after being over there, sitting there in that one spot for about 30 seconds, just crashing, running everywhere. And I didn't know if maybe the bull spooked and took off, if my son put an arrow in him, I had no idea. So I head back over there, and my son now is walking toward me. And he's coming up, and I'm like, hands spread apart, half grinning, like, what? What happened? Anything? And he kind of gives me that kind of a fist pump there, and I'm like, oh man, I know he released an arrow, something happened. So I get over there, and he says, yeah, as you recall, I could hear him popping, breaking things like he was coming in. And then all of a sudden he just stopped. And he didn't come any closer. And I figured him to be around 30, 35 yards, but I could not see him. I could hear him walking. So I slowly moved to my left. He said, in the direction it sounded like he was walking, then he'd stop, and then he'd walk. So I just started slipping through real silent as you continue to do a few calls and move away. And as I slowly moved to my left, I saw a little opening. And I thought, well, this is good as any. If he comes, and he was moving from, right to left, hopefully he'll come across. Sure enough, just in no time at all, he said the bull ended up being a 5-point, a really nice 5-point bull. He just came slipping through, paralleling Paul, and he ended up coming to that opening, and Paul stopped him with a sound. And I believe at that time he used a little cow mew. He did it with his voice, kind of a meow. That was all he did. And as the bull came, it just kind of looked over there, nothing, challenging or intimidating. You just kind of looked at him, and Paul shot right there, double lunged that bull. That bull took off. So now this country is pretty fixed up. So now Paul comes back to me, and we're standing there, and I said, oh, where were you? Right here when you shot? What was going on? He goes, no, I was way over here. And I'm like, you were? I said, okay, well, let's just go over there and see about where you were. So we're walking around, and he goes, well, this isn't it, I can't find. And, we're searching for 10 minutes. We cannot find where Paul was. He goes, and I said, you should have stayed right there. You should have never left so we could, you need to know where that spot is. And I've told him this before. And he goes, well, he said, Dad, I took an arrow out of my quiver and I stuck it in the ground, like you had mentioned before. And I looked at him like, you did? Well, why did you tell me this? And he goes, I just thought I'd see it. He goes, yeah, my arrow's sticking out of the ground. Oh, man, what a relief. I mean, now I'm looking for a flag, so to speak, So now we're really picking it up, looking, and we find the arrow. There it is, stuck in the ground. We're probably 60, 70 yards where he thought he should have been or where he was standing. I mean, things change in those woods. So you remember something like that if you're with your son or another member. Stick an arrow in the ground. Grab one out of your quiver, stick it. If you're going to move from that spot to catch up with your partner or have him meet you, do something that gives you an indication of right where to go back. Well, fortunately, my son did that because then he showed me right where the bull was standing. And he goes, it was like right here, and I'm looking everywhere. Nothing. 40-yard shot roughly is what he anticipated it to be, and nothing. We look everywhere, nothing. So I start meandering a little bit more to the left, more to the right, and I look, and I see the ground all kicked up. And I'm looking, and I go, this is where he was, right here. I'm looking back, I can see his arrow, where it was. So I go back to him, I said, this is where it was, right here. Let's go up. So now we're tracking, looking, no blood, nothing. And this is a double lung shot. And we're tracking, moving, we go maybe, I don't know exactly, but 75, 80 yards, maybe 90. And there's this bull laying there piled up. And not 1 ounce of blood between right where he shot and right where that bull was laying there dead. Nothing. Just tracks is all we followed. And of course, right there at the crime scene where the bull is laying dead, he's got blood everywhere. But he never bled in that. From the impact to where he was in between, we could never find anything. So, never give up if you don't find blood right away right there. And we had waited. I should mention that from where he shot, he said it was a really good shot. And we did wait probably approximately 40, 45 minutes before we went forward. because he said it was a really good shot. And so I went with him on that. And he has killed several bulls before that. So that was something we went on. But anyway, I wanted to share that story with you because you never know what's going to happen when you're leaving the elk woods and something happens and hit that grunt. It worked for us at that time, and it's something that maybe you'll be able to use in the future, and it'll help you fill your tag with your hunting partner or a family member like it did with us. So thanks a lot for listening. And I appreciate you tuning into that, and hopefully maybe this will help you somewhere along your hunts this year. Thanks so much. Bye.